Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of To The Point with Greg and Grant. Today we're so excited about our special guest. We are getting right to the point, starting now. Hello everyone. Today as our guest we want to welcome John Klymshyn, also known as Coach K. John has been a professional speaker for more than 20 years. He is the founder and president of the Business Generator, Inc., a management, sales, and communications training and coaching firm. John has authored 3 critically acclaimed sales and leadership books to help readers attain success in both the management and execution of sales, as well as 2 audiobooks centered around self-development, and offers an extensive video training series. A few of his book titles are Move the Sale Forward, Position Yourself and Your Business to Make Things Happen, and also The Ultimate Sales Manager's Guide, as well as one of my all-time favorites, How to Sell Without Being a Jerk, which has so many interesting ideas as it relates to sales and business development generation. So we are really excited to have him as a guest today. John, welcome to the show.
I'm thrilled to be here, Greg. Thanks for reaching out and thanks for coordinating this.
Oh, our pleasure. Our pleasure. We appreciate the time you have. John, I have so many questions for you, but of course we cannot cover them all here. To begin, I'd like to ask you how you got started in the ever-changing sales and leadership management field.
Well, after 4 years of active duty with the world's finest Navy, I was 6 months before I got off of my first tour of duty, I met a California blonde nurse, and that kind of changed the trajectory of my life, because my goal when I was getting ready to leave the Navy was to return home to New York and reconnect with my musical collaborator, a songwriting partner of mine. And our goal was to be famous songwriters and musicians. And when I got out of the Navy, and I dragged my newly minted wife all the way back to New York, I realized that before we could get those $1 million checks for royalties, that I had to find a way to put money in the bank on a regular basis. So my friend worked at an employment agency in Lower Manhattan, and his role was to help people get jobs. His company was paid a fee for identifying talent and getting them prepared for interviews and matching them to the right job. And he invited me to come to the agency to see if they could place me. And they sent me out on a handful of interviews. And in between the interviews, I would sit in the office and I would watch what these folks were doing. And it was chaos. It was like the floor of the stock exchange. Everybody was yelling and waving papers around. And they were talking about, I have a secretary who will do this. I have an insurance coder that will do this. I have a legal secretary who will do that. And I know these terms sound old, but it was some time ago. And every so often, one of these people would get up and they would hang numbers on the wall next to their name. And I was curious about this, and I asked, well, what is that all about? And I was told, that's how much money they just made in commission. And that got my attention. And I thought, okay, well, how exactly does it work? So I sat with the manager, and she asked me a couple of questions. Number one, she says, are you afraid of picking up the phone? Well, I've always had a great relationship with the phone. I love talking on the phone. And as a musician, I love listening. And I said, no, I don't have any problem picking up the phone. She says, do you think you could starve for 2 months? And in typical New Yorkese response, I said, I'm not making any money sitting here. So if I can have something to do where I can potentially earn some commissions, yes, I'd be interested in that. So the way I got started was, as many things that present themselves in life, it kind of seemed by accident, but not really, because I was immediately caught up in what the job was really about. And yes, as a mercenary capitalist, I wanted to make money. What it really was about was making matches. And the selling that we were doing was the purest form of selling, which is selling the intangible, selling that this person and this job are matched properly, and that person will stay there for a long enough period of time for the employer to get their money's worth. So that was how I started in sales. I was fortunate enough to have a desk right in front of one of the top producers, and as someone who is a listener, even though, I do get paid to speak, as a listener, when I wasn't on the phone, I would listen to how he would prepare people for interviews, how he would introduce himself to new companies, how he would negotiate the final salary for these folks. And that year, that 12-month period working that desk went by like a shot, because there was so much action and there was so much interaction, and there were a lot of disappointments and a lot of frustration. And I focused on trying to find a way to balance those out, the highs and the lows. And I found that I was spending about a third of my time helping new people in how they went about their approach and their mindset. And that, I think that was when the seeds of training and coaching and helping other people, that's when those were planted.
Now, John, one question that I had for you, because out of the books that Greg had mentioned here at the very beginning, that you wrote How to Sell Without Being a Jerk, I was kind of wondering what inspired that. Like, through your sales career, did you just witness one person after another just being absolutely horrible on the phone?
Well, as a matter of fact, I did, because what happened was that I saw the clear distinction between overly aggressive, pushy, challenging, poke you in the chest selling approaches that made my skin crawl. And right? I mean, it's like, you should do this because I think it's a good idea. Okay, well, you know what? I grew up in New York. I don't tolerate that. If I got something I want to do, I'll do it. I don't need your help.
Right.
Do me a favor, go down the street and get me a piece of pizza and shut up. But in the meantime, as a parent, I wanted to be able to go home at night and look my kids in the eye and be proud of what it was that I did.
Oh, sure.
And I had this romantic vision that selling could be done professionally. It could be done with honor and with respect. And what was fascinating to me was that the more I focused on that, the larger the transactions became that I got involved in. And I want to credit the right person for the title of the book. My wife and I, years ago, this was about 4 months after the Ultimate Sales Manager's Guide came out. We were very excited because we had positioned it properly. We had placed it in Hudson's bookstores all across North America. We had made an investment to place it properly. And as a result of that, and some of the promotion we did, we sold out of the first printing of the book in 2 months.
Oh,
and that was a significant, that was a pretty significant accomplishment. So the publishers were like, well, apparently this guy knows how to sell books, so let's get him to write another one, which was a thrill. So I'm sitting with the offer and the number of what the advance would be, and my wife and I are sitting at our favorite Mexican restaurant in a town called Ventura, California.
Yep.
And I said, I'm not sure what I want to write about. I mean, there's a million topics and there's so many different ways I could go. And in between inhaling some tortilla chips with the world's greatest salsa, she looked at me and said, why don't you write a book called How to Sell Without Being and she didn't use the word jerk. She used something a little more aggressive, let's say.
That we can't say on the air.
That starts with D. You can use your imagination. And I looked at her and I said, holy cow, honey, do you kiss the kids with that mouth? And she said, well, you surround yourself with people who are high integrity, that focus on honor, that hold themselves accountable to being professional. So let's not pussyfoot around. Let's title the book and let's have you write about how you've built a practice of 15 years with major brands across North America and outside of North America, how you've done that. And every client that you talk about, that you have an extended relationship with, they ask about your family. They know that you like red wine. They give you a hard time when the New York Football Giants lose. That is not selling like a jerk. That is making human connections and doing that with a very high mindset around what your purpose is. And this is all coming out of a nurse. This is all coming out of someone who's lived with an annoying sales guy from New York for so many years, right? So I sat down and I worked on the proposal, and we even pitched the book with that kind of controversial title. We got to 3 weeks before the final marketing decisions were made at Wiley, and marketing came back and said, we just can't bring ourselves to do it. We need to soften that word. So I was working regularly with a really smart marketing person by the name of Sandra Solani, and she said, well, maybe we can have some fun with the subtitle. And the subtitle is the Foolproof Approach to the World's Second Oldest Profession.
Right.
Yeah. That's awesome. And if I can pull on the thread here that you mentioned, so, as you know, sales has a bad connotation, right? And there's a lot of unique challenges being in sales. I mean, everybody's in sales, right, John? Even if your position doesn't say sales or BD, everybody is in sales in some capacity. They're selling their ideas. They're selling decisions to their spouses, to their children, to their coworkers, things like that. Being in the aerospace and defense industry as we are, what do you think would be maybe some unique challenges in a sales and BD role as it relates more in a technical sale versus maybe not so technical? Although either or is the same in terms of importance.
Well, I think that's a great question, man. Because when you're talking about the larger sale, you're talking about in today's world selling to what I refer to as the decision committee. When I started in sales and the type of selling I was doing, I was selling directly to the hiring manager. I wasn't selling to HR. When I started, HR didn't even exist. It was personnel, right? Mm-hmm. So we would call on VPs, we would call on CEOs, we would call on presidents, because they're the ones that would do the direct hiring, and they would say yes or no to the fee. Mm-hmm. Well, in today's world, you've got 4, 7, 9 people that have either a voice or a vote or both. When a vendor, a product, a service, a software program is selected. And it's not just selected because, in my world, as far as I know, and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong, it's not only selected based on price. Yep. People are looking at reputation and flexibility and how long it will take to onboard, right? Does that make sense to you?
Yep, absolutely. So true.
So if we're selling to a decision committee, that means, okay, I have to be a little bit of a ringmaster. I have to be a little bit of an ambassador, and I have to make sure I never get away from what my role is. And my role is to bring the deal in. Now, in order to bring the deal in, and in order to do what you said, which is, it doesn't matter what your title is, at some point in life, you're going to sell something to somebody. So what does that mean? Well, I'm sure you guys have seen some of the recent things I've been posting about the fact that, to me, it all boils down to language. I've written books, and I'm very proud of them, and I continue to write. And every interaction, our conversation before we started recording, it boils down to language. So let's be selective. Let's think at a higher level when we think about what is the language I'm about to deliver. What question will I ask? What statement will I make? What do I want either of those to accomplish? And in today's world, specifically in your guys' environment, it's not about features and benefits. It's about how it fits in with the vision of my organization. And how do we vet you in a way that our folks, the voices and the votes, are going to lean in our favor. So what that means to me, and it's a very long answer, Greg, and I apologize, but I got a lot of ideas around this.
Yeah, no, this is terrific. You're hitting right on.
To me, well, I appreciate it. To me, the definition, people, like you said, there's a negative connotation to sales. Well, I think there's a negative connotation to bad salespeople.
Yeah.
And I think there's a negative connotation to bad sales experiences. So what I want to do is I want to completely separate myself from that universe. So that means I'm going to reach higher, and I'm going to go deeper into how this works. So I'm going to have a definition of selling that as many people as possible can relate to. And my definition of selling is having people feel good about making a positive decision to move the conversation forward with me today. And I said that slowly because if anybody's listening and they want to write that down, of course they can rewind. I get it, but I want to walk through the logic of that and the laser focus of the mindset. That think about it. The first word in the definition is a verb. Having people, meaning we're living the experience. It's happening now, based on the actions I've taken, based on the language I've delivered. So having people feel good, well, we know that people buy based on emotion, about making a positive decision, meaning it's their idea, not mine, to move the conversation forward with me today. Greg, when I came out with the phrase move the conversation forward, and this was several years ago, everyone in the room froze. They were like, wow, that resonates. Because I had a salesperson working for me who said, no matter how many times I talk to this prospect, I cannot get him to come to our side of the fence. I just cannot push him to commit. And I said, neither of those are what we're interested in. Because we don't want to make anyone do anything. We do not want to drag, drive, force, or push the conversation. We want to move it forward. And that means momentum, and that means collaboration, and that means engagement on the part of the other person. So now, all of a sudden, I have a tremendous sense of freedom in my selling mentality because I'm not trying to make something specific happen that I have invented in advance of our conversation. I want to find out where we are, you and I, or you and your committee and I.
Yes.
I want to find out where you ultimately want to be, and then I'm going to make things easy for everyone. I'm going to ask you, how do you want this process to move forward? Because when we ask a question that puts someone to work creatively, they love it.
Yes. Wow. That's a great answer, John.
Especially in our industry.
Especially, yes, in our industry.
So if we're moving people in a specific direction, think about the energy behind that. That means that you've already decided where you want them to go. What would happen if you said, what ultimately are you looking to achieve as a result of hiring someone, bringing someone in, adding this software? When we can have the conversation about what we're selling in the third person, now we get them working creatively. And here's the thing that is difficult for some of us salespeople to accept, that we may be able to disqualify people sooner, and that saves everyone a bunch of time, and it certainly saves the salesperson some emotional roller coaster experiences.
Yep. So
when we decide in advance that the prospect needs what we have to sell, we have taken away half of our selling ability.
Well, John, I had another question. It really kind of builds off of what you said a few moments ago about it all comes down to language. We've been talking a lot of, I believe that folks are probably assuming that we're talking a lot about, person-to-person conversations or over-the-phone conversations, but what's your take on email? Do folks potentially run into the potential pitfall of emailing like a jerk, and there are
the title of my next book.
Well, and because I'm especially thinking about our industry because it is so technical and complex that a lot of times people they just will let that phone ring and then we'll send you a 3-page email to follow up. And so I would love to get your take on written word as opposed to spoken word.
Okay, and I love this because we all of us are very busy convincing ourselves that what we sell is wildly technical and difficult for most humans to understand. I have an organization I'm working with now that sells cybersecurity, UCaaS, and CCaaS, which is Unified Communications as a Service and software as a communications service. So pretty technical stuff. But here's the thing. Their top producers rarely get into technical conversation. What they do is they follow the guidance that I've been bringing to their org, which is every selling conversation is about the future. If it's about the future, then that means that we need to draw them out and that we need to do something very specific called lead with curiosity and back it up with technique. So if we're going to email either in addition to calling or instead of calling, we have to think about who's the audience, how will we capture their attention, and how do we move them to action? In the same vein as moving conversations forward is different from getting them to do something.
Sure.
An email should have a call to action. Every email with a prospect should end with a question. And what we do is we will write a question and then we will spend 3 paragraphs explaining why we've asked it.
Very interesting.
That doesn't help me. If I'm asked a question in what I call the thunder and rush of my day, if I get an email from someone who I kind of recognize because I think I got a voicemail from them once, then I'm going to scan it. This is how life works in the business world. They're going to scan it. So if they're going to scan it, guess what? 3 paragraphs is too long. 2 paragraphs is pushing the envelope. How about you follow a couple of guidelines? One is focus on facts and be firm. Second is be brief.
Yeah.
And the
absolutely.
third is end with a question. I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's excellent.
That is excellent. What do you see could be some common pitfalls for those that use email?
Great question, and I love when I'm in front of audiences and I bring this up because you can see by the expressions on people's faces how guilty they are. And being raised New York, Irish, Roman, Catholic, I can recognize guilt a mile away. We were raised on a steady diet of fear and guilt. God knows what you did today. Would you like a sandwich? Okay, I don't know what that's supposed to mean. I think that we have to keep. One of the common pitfalls, is the frequency with which we will begin sentences with the word I.
Yeah.
I'm sending you this note because I think that we can help you, and I want you to look at the attached 17 diagrams, and I am going to call you again. And here's the thing. Here's a simple rule of thumb, and it's in this book that you guys apparently are big fans of that I expect you to buy more copies of, called How to Sell Without Being a Jerk. The third time you begin a sentence with the word I, your reader mentally checks out.
Yep. I can see that.
Because that email is about you, not the reader.
Yep.
And here's the thing. Writing is not done for the writer. Writing is done for the reader. And you guys have validated that for me once again. You know, you made me want to go out and start, walking through the mall holding up a copy of my book in front of people. Hey, have you read this? It's pretty good. I may want to check it out. We believe that our thoughts, our opinions, and our intentions are what is going to sell. That's incorrect. Our thoughts, our opinions, our intentions should be discovered by the prospect, and when they ask us the question, that's when we tell them what we think. Until they do, it's up to us to ask questions to draw them out. So in the same way that the third time you begin a sentence with the word I, your listener or your reader mentally checks out. Another rule of thumb, or a painful selling truth, or a painful human truth, is the more I listen to what you say, the more fascinating you find me.
Right.
Interesting. Do you prescribe to the strategy of write how you speak, John?
I think you want to write in a way where you will hold the attention of the reader. And if your personality can come through, that's great. If you write so that you're explaining yourself, then I think that you are making yourself more visible than is necessary. To me, one of the best compliments about my writing is when I read your work, it's like you're sitting in the room talking to me.
Yeah.
Now that's a great compliment to me. That doesn't mean that that's everyone's style.
Sure.
So we have to think about a couple of things. Number one is make sure that we don't begin too many sentences with I. So I would encourage everyone who's listening to this, regardless of their role, regardless of their level of accomplishment, to open up Outlook when they stop listening to this and open the last 3 emails that they have composed and count how many sentences begin with I. Because that's a wake-up call. That is an indication as to who your writing is focused on. And like I said, writing is done for the reader, not for the writer. So if every selling conversation is about the future, and the goal is to move the conversation forward, whatever I write should point the reader to the future and ask them a question to either get them to respond to the email or get them to pick up the phone.
Mm-hmm.
So, John, when we've been talking about these emails, in my head, I've been kind of envisioning just that kind of, for lack of a better phrase, casual email conversation between two folks. But what are your thoughts when it comes to something a little bit more formal? Because in our industry, something that business development folks deal with all the time is like writing up official proposals and submitting it to the government in hopes of winning a program or something like that. Would you say that I don't know, like the goal of writing up this RFP might be to have an opportunity to enter into a conversation to move things forward, or?
Yeah, because they won't until there's a conversation. Now, when I say conversation, it can be conducted via email. I've certainly had conversations conducted over email. I am always looking for the opportunity to shift that to live, in person, over the phone, video, whatever. Because when you and I are connected, either on the phone or over a video call or in the same room, things occur that would not occur through the ping pong of email. There's body language, there's eye contact, there's the opportunity to make a joke, where when you're writing an RFP, that's not the place for humor.
No. I wonder if it'd be more entertaining if people did that, though.
Well, you certainly would get their attention, wouldn't you?
Yeah. So you're saying, and we certainly hope that our response to your requirements is one that will excite and interest you in speaking to us. And oh, by the way, did you hear about when the horse walked into the bar and the bartender said, with a long face?
And that wraps up part 1 of our entertaining interview with the quick-witted John Klymshyn. John covered a lot of topics in this installment, from the importance of listening to focusing on the goal of moving conversations forward to how everything boils down to language. Personally, my favorite piece of advice that he was able to share with us was to surround yourself with those folks who have a very high level of integrity. Please join us next time for the conclusion of our discussion with John. Thanks for listening.
The views expressed in this podcast are our own and not those of the companies we work for currently or previously, or of any person or organization affiliated or doing business with those companies.